thing that David recommended to me last week that saves my window positions. If only I could remember what it was called. What is it?
It was in the chat.
Yeah. Nah, it's obviously not set to run while on startup, so that's not useful. Screenbox. There we go.
What's that? They were requesting a router. I was told I couldn't bring a router for Hot Hardware. I wasn't told I couldn't, but Barry came up with something more interesting to talk about. So I've got 2 routers, but neither of them has made it onto the podcast yet. But maybe if we get desperate next week. So that's all I have to say about that.
Oh. Got the wrong script.
We're all a bit low energy this afternoon.
Screenbox, yes, David. Thank you very much. It works a treat.
Do you want to see my new chocolate?
Yes.
No. Yeah.
Majority has it.
I'm going to have to tell you this story backwards. So I was at a craft fair. There we go. I was at a craft fair at the weekend, and there was people doing some artisanal chocolate, and there were some people that clearly weren't. We were just doing some cleverly labelled chocolate, and there was one that they've mixed a Twix and a Kit Kat. Which comes up as that. Now, the reason I've got to tell this story backwards is what attracted me to the store was now I can't see myself. I don't know if you can see that, which is basically best granddad, because of course it's Father's Day, and I thought, oh, that'll be nice for Father's Day, and it was. I think it was £4 for a tenner or something like that. And I thought, oh, I'll have a look around here. There'll be some nice ones. And that was the only clean one. So, and my kids were approaching. It's like, shh, I need to buy the chocolate quick. So I ended up with you cock. And then, and talking about copyright, I'm not sure that will sort of pass. So frankly, I've been hiding this chocolate from the kids all weekend. And I have no idea who I'm going to give the other £3 to. It might be the PC Pro prize for this year.
I feel like I have to do some kind of apology for the language now.
Technically, we're not. I'm on YouTube. I can say anything I want.
That's true. Yes, they've adjusted their content policies, haven't they, to support free speech?
Absolutely. I do apologise to everyone for my rude chocolate.
Why the eye roll for free speech?
God, just because that's the X.com thing, isn't it? Free speech is now basically you should be allowed to use all the slurs and hate things you want, and it's not improving the discourse, in my personal opinion.
Are we live on YouTube? Because there's
we are.
James London saying he can't see it.
Oh,
I say we are. I don't know.
F5, James. That'll try. I'm not looking either. I'm looking at my phone. But
I can see us on the YouTube dashboard. So
I'll wave at you,
James
James.
London.
There you go.
Bang your TV. Should fix it.
Turn it off and on again.
Hey, don't knock it. Some of us made a career out of that. In fact, I've just written those words for my next RWC column. I take it Mr. Danton is glued to the tennis.
I think he's back. He's seeing Lanevo today, apparently.
Is he?
It's not stopping him from sending me snippy messages asking where my copy is.
Oh no! Wait, what? Wait, is there a deadline?
Not for you that I can go off.
No, that's okay.
No, I'm working on the review section, and apparently, Steve Haynes is sitting there, probably not literally twiddling his thumbs, but waiting for me to file copy through, and I'm sitting here on the podcast, so that's all great.
You can't be everywhere, Darian.
No, exactly. I think Tim would just like it if I was somewhere sometimes.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Right, hold on. Let me click the what's it. Oh no, we're live, so I won't talk about that. Let's talk about something else.
No, go on.
No, I can't. I really can't.
Red button content.
It's Leandro and NDA.
It's only for the OnlyFans subscribers.
This is it. Oh, right. There. Right, I think that's... No matter how big the monitor is, I just can't get enough.
Gavin Hall says, question for the journos, do you miss working together in an office?
Yes, sometimes. I don't miss having to be in the office all the time, but...
I think that's a no.
I don't miss getting to the office and back, certainly.
Yeah. What I'd really like is the ability to wake up in the morning and go, oh, I fancy going to the office today, and then being able to go in and everybody else being there. Because the problem is, of course, like I could, if once you switch to hybrid, like you can go into the office, but you won't necessarily see the people you want to work with anyway, because they won't be in that day, so it all kind of falls apart a bit.
Yes.
But there were some good things about the in-person days.
There definitely were.
Although my liver is definitely in a much better place nowadays.
Yes. Right, where are we?
20 seconds.
20 seconds to go.
Yeah, the commute from Cambridge nowadays would be a bit of a pain, admittedly.
How does the band cope with this now, Darian? Or have you...
I'll tell you, well, we've got 6 seconds to go,
Okay.
so maybe I'll tell you a bit later.
No problem.
But thank you for asking. And 1 o'clock.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the PC Pro podcast. It is Thursday the 12th of June, and I'm Barry Collins, News and Features Editor at PC Pro. And with me today, I've got a pair of doctors. I've got Dr. Darren Gammer-Smith.
Hello.
I've got Dr. Roshna Huma.
Hello.
And I've got Huddersfield Polytechnic's finest Lee Grant.
Thank you very much.
You had an opportunity to make a Gilbert and Sullivan reference there, and you're probably very pleased you didn't.
Did I? That's because I didn't go to Cambridge. But let's move along. And, we're moving along to Apple, who have been announcing lots of stuff this week, Darren.
Yeah, well, it was WWDC a couple of days ago, and my wife momentarily thought I was asking what would somebody something, but no, it is, of course, the Worldwide Developer Conference, which it is for developers. I mean, I guess it's worldwide in the sense that, people from all over the world tune into this one event that's always held at Apple's headquarters. It's not like a global celebration. This year, it didn't seem to be that exciting. I would say there wasn't a lot of buzz about it like there was. Sometimes there's a real vintage year when there's lots of kind of rumours and suspicion that they're going to do something huge, like that time when they suddenly unveiled that Apple was going to switch to Intel, or that time when they suddenly unveiled that Apple was going to switch away from Intel. But this year, the major announcement that's got people talking is a new look for Apple's operating systems. This is partly interesting because they haven't done such a big comprehensive visual refresh since iOS 7, when they ditched the skeuomorphism and went to the lurid green buttons and the brightly coloured squircles that we're all familiar with now. But also, it's not just across iOS now. It's coming to macOS and watchOS and tvOS and I think probably visionOS in some way. And it's called Liquid Glass. And basically the idea is now the model is going to be that there's content on your screen, and then there are controls and things sort of floating over it on transparent panels using all sorts of clever GPU techniques to render the transparency and refraction and reflections and just make it look like sort of a multi-layered, well, I would say liquid glass, like a multi-layered series of things positioned on top of each other that move around and can stretch and can have visual impact on each other. And I mean, I'm kind of struggling to describe it because it doesn't, if you've seen a video, you'll probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, it's very hard to explain. But the key point that I want to say is that I do not get it at all. I know some people do. Some people have been saying this is amazing. Android has just been swept onto the back foot by Apple's incredible new design. But I don't think it adds anything whatsoever to usability. And as far as I can see, the massively expanded use of transparency is also going to make it just harder to see what's going on your screen, and it really kind of gets in the way of the visual impact. They've shared some pictures of, actually, I don't know if you can install the beta on a Mac already, but of macOS 26. I should have said, by the way, they've changed the naming convention for all their operating systems too. So instead of iOS 7 and macOS 14 and so on, they're all 26 to mark the year that they're going to be mostly available in. So we're kind of following the Windows 95 model here. Anyway, just to wrap up this bit, they've shared a picture of macOS 26. And yeah, it just looks very, very grey and dull. All the colour has been sucked out of the icons in the dock, which I assume, like when you hover over one, it will become colourful or something. But it looks like an enormous step backwards to me. I don't really understand why anyone would consider this either aesthetically or practically an improvement. But I may well be in the minority because Apple's been right about these things before.
Yeah, the Discord wags are already hailing Apple for inventing Windows Vista, which of course had the glass interface nearly 20 years ago. The interesting thing here for me is that the that sort of glass look came from Vision. It is the interface largely used for Vision OS already. So they're sort of leading with the products that almost nobody has. But is that an indication? I mean, I personally think Vision is almost dead in the water already. But is this an indication that they're putting their emphasis on Vision going forward rather than Mac and iPhone?
Well, this will shock you, but Apple's been tight-lipped about any future hardware releases. I believe, although I don't know if the Apple Vision Pro has been completely wound down, but we know that it hasn't ramped up. It hasn't become the big consumer seller. But I believe that department is still up and running, and there probably will be something coming. So maybe they're doing the very clever thing of laying the groundwork years and years in advance, and it's all going to fall into place. Because yes, of course, it does look like Vision Pro, but the key, absolutely central thing about the Vision Pro, which does not apply to any other product, none of the products this has been released for or is being released for, is that you want to be able to look through the interface so you can see the real world beyond. That does not apply in the same way when you're just looking at content on your phone screen.
Lee, what do you make of it?
I'll just pick on what Darian said about the Vision Pro, because when you look, I only saw the press video. One of the highlights that put forward was just leads into exactly what Darian's just said about the idea that you're meant to be able to look through it to see the sort of the real world as well. But the thing they were pushing was they've designed a clock, so when you look at the wall, you see the time in beautiful detail. But I was thinking, do you know what also is in beautiful detail? It's the clock that's already on my wall. All right, I don't get excited too much about themes and colour schemes and stuff like that. I've been around too long and I see too many different machines to get excited about things. But where I think this might be working, and I think where Mac might be going, you mentioned everything is now version 26, and I think what they're trying to do with this is, because it's going to be available on everything, I think what they're trying to do is make every device you have look the same. And I think that could be quite nice for continuity. So when you're on your phone, it's got the same theme as your Mac. It's got the same theme as your phone, your Vision Pro, for the three people that bought one. And so rather than I've got at the moment, I've got 4 Apple devices in various places, but they're all different. The backgrounds are different. The font sizes are different. And it does feel like I'm using 4 different machines, and very much one of the overarching themes of, I think, their presentation was about trying to make Mac sort of the same no matter how you interact with it. So I think liquid glass might be a big part of that. But just what the Discord good folks mentioned was Vista, and as soon as I saw it, I thought of Vista. And I really hope that Apple has listened or remembered what happened 20 years ago, because the way you made Vista usable was to turn off Windows Aero because the performance was so horrific. Now, obviously, we are 2 decades down the line, but we'll just put that flag in the sand and see if it comes back later.
Roche, are you loving the glass look?
So I hadn't seen any images, and then based on Darian's description, my mind immediately went to Minority Report. Those huge screens.
Yeah.
And so if it's like, and then I looked it up and I was like, I don't know. But if it is like the screens, the Minority Report, I can see how, if you're working as a team, or if you're giving presentations, or if you're doing training and content and stuff like that, and provided you can also sort of multi-screen. So, I am full into now the Minority Report analogy. But yeah, so, and then if you can like ping things across, then this sounds like something that would just make learning and presenting really interactive and fun, and yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
Well, talking of window, so go on.
But I don't know if my vision based on Darren's description is anywhere near the reality.
Well, I think you're more near Vision Pro than maybe the rest of the Apple devices. But talking of windowing, Darren, the iPad's getting some interesting new windowing features.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think Lee's onto something when he says the idea is that everything is the experience will be consistent across platforms. When the original iPhone came out, Apple made a big song and dance about how iOS was based on OS X, as it then was called. And then obviously the iPad came out, and although they've officially split that off into iPad OS, it's still got the same underlying core. And we've been saying for years and years, it's kind of crazy that iPad apps are becoming almost identical in their capabilities and their power. And now, obviously, the iPad has the same processor as a Mac laptop that you can buy. This is going even further in iPadOS 26. It's now going to be possible to, when you open an app in the new iPadOS, it will open full screen as usual, but you can now shrink it down into a movable, resizable window, exactly like the desktop for decades and decades and decades. You can have proper multi-window multitasking, and there's also going to be a swipe down menu bar, exactly like the menu bar that appears on macOS, with enhanced support for using a mouse with your iPad. So basically, there's a very, very clear convergence route here, and somebody on PC Pro, somebody on the PC Pro Discord channel, I'm sorry I can't see the comment now, someone was saying it's Wondercool just says now they just still need to add touch to the macOS and the circle will be entirely complete. And I think that's right. This does seem like almost the final or the penultimate step in making the iPad and the MacBook laptop just two dimensions of the exact same thing.
But it's interesting in terms of positioning that when the iPad came to life, it was very much a larger iPhone. It wasn't directly competing with a Mac at all. Over the years, it has migrated much, much closer to now more like a Mac than the iPhone. As you said, the processors. Now we've got an operating system that's looking pretty, not identical to Mac OS, but certainly showing many of its features. Interesting positioning wise, is that just a reflection of how people have used iPads over the years, do you think, or why are they shifting that way?
I always thought I was not an early fan of the iPad at all. I sort of said, it's too limited to be useful for its size and its bulk and its price. So I think they've kind of, gradually they've iterated and people have found what the iPad is good at, and ultimately they've sort of they've been evolving towards the rediscovery of the laptop format was the best one all along.
Go on, Lee.
I was trying to think where, and I seem to think this every time we talk about these things, where the cannibalization point is for things like the MacBook Air, given the power that you can get now with an iPad. And I wonder if there has to be a point in the future where they will say, okay, any app that you buy will work on anything, because naturally there's going to come a point where they're going to drop the A processors that are in the basic iPads, and your entry level iPad will be an M processor. So you have to think at that point that is the gateway to say to the developers, okay, whatever you build will work, and they'll just have to sort of tweak it for displays and things like that. And then you have to start looking at where you position the iPads and MacBooks, and I think it will get a bit muddy there. So I think while they've still got the A processors, excuse me, I think we'll still see this differential between a laptop and a tablet, but I think it is narrowing ever closer. And some of these features that they've got, like for example background tasks, which I thought was really interesting. Conversely, just as another point, I have a lot of users and customers that love an iPad because of their simplicity, but then accidentally drag their finger, put it into split window mode, and can't get it back out again. And the complexity of the iPad, which is really sort of hindering some users that loved it because of its simplicity. So I think there's a possibility they could get very complicated for some people and put people off.
Yeah, it's almost like the iPad needs two modes. It's like one mode to use in pure tablet reading mode, and another when you've got the keyboard potentially connected and you want to do that kind of windowing. For me, I built the iPad Pro last year with the keyboard, and this new windowing, the better file system, the background task you say, suddenly makes that a lot more useful. But I absolutely get your point that for my dad at home who just wants to flick through and watch Netflix or browse the web, it's starting to get a little bit like Windows. Darren, Intel Macs have had their day as well, it seems, or very close to having their day.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much all there is to say about that one. Intel, it's been announced that Intel Macs will not be supported. Well, they won't get major supports. They won't get the latest operating system upgrades after this upcoming version 26, which isn't too shocking. It would have been 6 years at that point since Apple Silicon was introduced. I think it's a bit less time since they phased out the very last of the Intel SKUs, as they say. But in general, this trajectory has been very evident evident for a while, and it's probably standing in the way of what I'm now just assuming is a done deal, that everything is going to converge on the one platform, as Lee says. So this is one of the least surprising announcements.
And just before we leave Apple, they were very quiet on Apple Intelligence during this hour and a half briefing.
They were, which was noticeable, like the dog that barked in the night, because previous WWDCs have been, certainly the last two or maybe three, there's been like, Apple Intelligence, you're going to love it. And it's so much, it's been a refrain that's echoed through Apple's public pronouncements, and it's gone very quiet. Last month on an earnings call, Tim Cook basically said, well, he's literally said, I can quote him, "We need more time to complete our work on improved Siri features so they meet our high quality bar." And then Craig Federighi, talking to the Wall Street Journal, echoed that. He said that Apple Intelligence and Siri didn't, quote, converge in the way quality-wise that we needed it to. We weren't able to achieve the reliability in the time we thought. Now, to be fair to Apple, I think they are trying to do something with Apple Intelligence which no one else is doing. They're trying to make it much more secure and private than the likes of OpenAI and Meta and so on. So they have set a higher bar for themselves, trying to do much more stuff on the device. But yeah, it is a little bit embarrassing for them that they talked such a big game only a year ago, and now they've had to just hush about it.
Well, not only that, but we're using that as the pure marketing push for the last generation of iPhones, and those features are just, there's no sign of them arriving anytime soon.
That is true, yes. They did say that the new Siri is going to be much more aware of your context and be able to be more intelligent about this, that, and the other. And they did have to pull those adverts in the end. So it's not like... they did start off promising that. But I think to give them a little bit of credit, I mean, they're trying to do something incredibly ambitious, and maybe they should have pulled the advert sooner or not been so cocksure about making the advert in the first place. But when it became apparent that wasn't going to be delivered, they have at least, shut up about it.
I do. Sorry, I was just going to say I do strongly recommend watching that Wall Street Journal interview, because it's very unusual these days to see Apple executives being interviewed in the first place, let alone getting a slight kick in as they did from the WSJ reporters. So look that one up. Sorry, Lee, I cut across you.
No. All I was going to say is, watching the presentation, they made a big play about offline Apple Intelligence, as Darian said, about, so this is device only. You don't even have to be connected to the internet, which I think is really sort of quite fresh. And sorry, I say offline, sorry, local AI is what I should have said, which I think was really interesting. But on the other hand, all these other whizzy jolly features that they talk about for the rest of the 74-hour presentation all seem to be the typical fare was basically, you give us as much information as we can and we'll make things brilliant. So there still is very much that reliance on, if you let us do this, we'll do that. And the one that really frightened me was they did a demo of the Apple Watch, the Workout Buddy, which is one of their new features, which basically analyzes all your information and provides you with some encouragement mid-run. It really got me thinking, because Garmin has had this sort of thing for a few years, and I wondered, given sort of everything that Apple knows about you, what would this thing say to me? You're really struggling on this run today, Lee, but I'm not surprised. You were in Greg's 3 times last week and stuff like that. No wonder your wife spends so much time at the office. She's with her new workmate. You should see his stats, Lee. He's like a butcher's dog, man. Now, half a mile ago. I'm not too enamoured with this. Thankfully, I don't have a watch.
Anything you want to add, Rach, before we move on?
No.
Okay.
Perfect.
We'll leave it at Lee's marital affairs and go on to Android 16, which has arrived. Not that anyone would really notice. It came out earlier this week, much earlier than Apple. Google normally release versions of Android. It's at least a month earlier, if not 2, than it regularly shows up, normally on the sort of autumn time frame that Apple releases its operating systems. So what's new? And that's a bloody good question, because there's really very little in there to scare the chickens. I downloaded it onto my Pixel 8a yesterday, and honestly, in over 24 hours of use of it, and I'm poking around different menus trying to find things that's changed, you would honestly struggle to tell the difference between 15 and 16. So they've left the visual overhaul that was due with Android 16. They pushed that back to September. That's not arriving. So there's no new UI to speak of. One of the key features was what they call these live notifications, where if, for example, you've ordered an Uber or you got some food coming from Just Eat and they provide a notification, that will now appear at the top of the phone with a sort of progress bar as to how far your driver is away or how long it's going to be before your KFC arrives. But that feature has also been postponed. It wasn't quite ready for real time yet, so that's not in here. The only feature I've managed to find in over 24 hours of looking is something they call advanced protection, which is a feature you can sort of click on your device. And this adds a whole range of different security measures. So, for example, it turns on something called the theft detection lock, where the phone locks automatically when motion indicates theft. I'd love to know quite what the criteria for what's theft and phone being dropped and whatever. But anyway, it's got Google Play Protect. It blocks the installation of unknown apps, so there's no side loading apps onto your phone, for example. It turns off all 2G networks. So if you're still in an area that's got a 2G network live, it prevents you from using it because it says 2G networks are less secure. I'm not quite sure what the rationale is there, if I'm being honest. On the web, there's various things where it blocks, it turns into a safe browsing mode, blocks harmful web pages, so it says, turns off some JavaScript sites that may be a security risk. And there's various other things like spam protection and message protection. But this is just one switch. You have to turn it on, then the phone has to restart to, in fact, enter this mode. So I've not had a real chance to play with it yet and see if it interferes with my daily life. But I'll be interested to see how that works out. Go on, Darren.
I can just add something. The reason why 2G is insecure is because it doesn't authenticate the tower. It's a very old what's the protocol, and in theory, someone could set up a fake tower for a man-in-the-middle attack, and your phone could connect to that. And then if that tower then passes the packets on to a real cell tower, then they could spy on what you're doing. I think the likelihood of anyone actually doing that, particularly in 2025, has got to be very, very low. But it is an absolutely legit security weakness. So fair enough, I suppose.
Okay, well, fair enough. It does, by the way, they do turn it back on in an emergency situation. So if you dial 999, there's only a 2G network available, it does switch it back on, so it's not a threat to life and limb. But that's about it. It's a pretty underwhelming release, to say the least. I'm not quite sure why they bother putting it out so early with very little to show off. It's all just a bit bewildering.
It's not that they're pushing it at all. If you know the Google podcast, I think it's called Made by Google. Their latest episode is about Android 16, and it's about 24 minutes of them just saying Android 16 and how much they love it, but very little about what it does. So it's either a very early push or something has gone wrong and they've got nothing to show, but they've printed the posters. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it just
feels like... very...
So go on, Dan.
It is very weird because, I mean, we were just talking about Apple kind of really going big on those features that weren't there, that they weren't able to deliver on time. But there was nothing pressing Google, as you say, to release this early. And what they've done is they've really messed up. I mean, already, I think perception of Google, of Google features, of Android's capabilities is really messy. I mean, I think, you can point to a couple of big iconic, let's say, iOS releases and say, yeah, this major feature appeared, and maybe not everyone knows, exactly what year it came in or how it differed from what was before. But I think it is a little bit of a landmark, a new version of iOS. It does generate a bit of a buzz. It's got a new look sometimes, new capabilities. And Android, because already it's smeared across half a dozen manufacturers rolling out at different speeds and implementing different things in different ways, it really struggles to get that sense of, a flag day is coming up when we're all going to get something big and new and interesting. And this just feeds into that. If we're going to get a whole new, not just a point release, but a completely new version, it popped up on my Pixel and said, your phone is about to get better, move up from Android 15 to Android 16. And then the numbers are getting quite big now, so the difference from 15 to 16 may not seem that huge, but you'd be entitled to expect a significant change. And like you, I have looked up and down, and I cannot find a single difference that I would not have encountered if I weren't actively, intensively looking for it. I think it's just bad for the brand, is in short.
Roche, anything to add?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, this happens, right, with products all of the time. You get that point of diminishing returns where, you improve, and there, there's quite the margin, and then suddenly everything plateaus. And then, of course, the trouble is that you can't command the same fee for, look, the wheel, man. Nobody's improving on the wheel. And we don't worry about that. It's just like, this is really good as it is. And yeah, just change for change's sake and small tweaks. But unless, for me, this changes for change's sake drives me absolutely wild, because I've just come to terms with something and then they're like, oh, this is a new feature. And you're like, yeah, but you know what? I was operating on this before and I was really efficient with it. And for the marginal improvements that I have, the downtime in learning the new layout and stuff like that, I'm not a fan.
Calvinator says maybe they can call it Android 26 and we'll get another 20 minutes out of it, but we haven't got 20 minutes to muse over that, so we're going to move on. This one's with you, Rose. Getty is getting busy with the lawyers.
Yes, and pretty uncontroversial, I think. So Getty, as you know, is the leading licensor of stock photography, loads of images, billions of images, in fact, and they are taking Stability AI to court. So I was having a think about this because to me this is really uncontroversial, plain vanilla, super simple. Not sure why Stability AI's lawyers aren't looking to settle and to try and come to some agreement. So over the weekend I was in Lyon, and shout out to the Liverpool Bar Association for winning the golf. Anyway, we're sitting there and we're having dinner, and one of the guests there said that his car had been stolen, and what had happened was that somebody had come along with a booster, and that was all caught in CCTV, and it was about the size of a phone, and then was able to jack the signal from the keys that were behind the door, boost it, and then drive off in the car. I don't think that anybody would disagree with me when I say that's theft. The car was stolen, that is theft. It doesn't matter that the method of the theft was kind of cool and very techy. Right, so here we go. So we have billions of images that have been scraped by Stability AI, and Getty are pursuing them for breach of copyright. And so I am looking at the facts of this and I'm thinking it is really uncontroversial. Now, I will say this, there are 60 issues before the High Court. That is the court of first instance. Getty have a lot on the line here. So if the High Court doesn't agree with me for any reason, more fool them, but it could then go to the Court of Appeal or jump the Court of Appeal and go to the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court get their hands on this, what they're going to do is that they're going to look at the black letter of the law. So what is the legislation that's in place? They will look at the Copyright Designs and Patent Act. They will look to see what the purpose of that was. What harm are you trying to avoid? And of course, the harm that you're trying to avoid is that the people who and the businesses that invest their money and their time and their energy and all of that in creating this archive do not lose out because somebody steals their stuff, right? And it's super simple, and I think that when you look through the pleadings, Stability AI say, they said, we didn't do it, but if we did do it, we didn't do it in the UK, which reads an awful lot like a confession, So, and anyway, what Getty also have is that they have plenty of images where their watermark is on this. So look, I think it's a slam dunk for Getty. Some things just are. I'm surprised Stability didn't want to just say, okay, hands up, let's work together and find a commercial arrangement that suits everyone.
Or is the problem for Stability and the other AI companies that if they do concede that point, that every copyright holder in the planet is going to be knocking on their door asking for the same settlement?
Sure. Well, I mean, the thing is that actually, so what you'll have with Getty is that, you know, they will have a lot of negotiating power. So, but I mean, that is quite right. Look, we the laws, we already have laws in place to protect artists and businesses, and it doesn't matter that people are now currently misunderstanding that or trying to drive innovation and say, oh well, we're not going to be able to innovate these like large language models or these large you know, we're not going to be able to crunch all of this data. It's like, well, no, because it doesn't matter the method or the purpose. You have taken things that do not belong to you, that have been licensed and that are protected. And so, you know, but there's you know, with a little bit of commercial creativity, they could come to a resolution where they have a, you know, a revenue sharing agreement. Look, we've taken all of your billions of images, we've created this. They could partner with each other, but what you cannot do is leave people who created this, collated it, archived it, stuck it in a library, looking after all of the interests, and then just say, yeah, actually, too bad, the technology has moved on, because the corollary would then be, well, I'll come along and then I'll steal Stability AI's technology and go, oh yeah, but I took it with a really nifty, like that. Then there's no end to it. It's a slippery slope. There are protections in place. They're in law. Yeah, for me, this is like, it's super clear.
Well, I don't think you were on the podcast a couple of weeks ago when we discussed this, but we were talking about a potential situation similar to the ALCS for publishing or the PRS for audio, where effectively, you know, royalties from AI companies go into a pool and that gets distributed back to creators in some form. Is that where you think we'll end up with this, Roche?
So I think that there's a myriad of commercial opportunities for people who are prepared to come to the table, and that's, I suppose, where my surprise is that Stability AI didn't just concede that they had taken this stuff and then sought to negotiate some kind of a settlement that worked for both of them. So yeah, so I think, yes, you could have a situation like, you remember the British phonographic, there probably still exist, where if you know, you played it in a bar or in a club or something
PRS.
like that, you'd so you had certain royalties going there. There may be something like that. There may be individual things like, so Getty is of such a significant size that to negotiate with them, that they would be able to accelerate, Stability AI would be able to accelerate their progress. And then if Getty then only negotiated with those guys and only contracted with them, then they're ahead of the competition by a significant margin. So I would have thought that Stability would have looked to try and settle this. And also, and then you're thinking, where's their litigation fund coming from? Because, you know, they're going to have to start to rely on the insurance, and somebody on the insurer's side would have had to kick the tires. And I think there's a myriad of opportunities, and I think there's everything to play for, and I think it's really alive. So I'm not saying that we pause innovation. I'm saying that as we progress with the innovative drive that we need to have if we're going to stay relevant here in the UK, but we have to be lively to the creators and we have to engage with them. And I think that it could be a situation not of like either or, but both of these companies doing incredibly well. But you have to work within the law, right? Yep. All companies have to work within the law. And right now it looks like Stability has not done that.
Yeah, I was looking. Sorry, 1 second, please excuse me. I was looking. I was looking at this because, as you say, it is kind of baffling that Stability would seem to want to, to stick it out rather than acknowledging any sort of wrongdoing. I see their lawyers have made a written statement. I couldn't find the entirety of it. Sorry, I was just trying to dig it up from the web, but it may have been buried too deeply. But I can find a lot of news agencies are quoting defence isn't really the right word. They say, and I quote, Getty's claims represent an overt threat to Stability's whole business and the wider generative AI industry. And I'm sort of thinking, Getty will surely be thinking, yes, that's the point. Good, that's what we're attempting to do. Stability's whole business, if Getty is correct, is built on copyright violation, and it should not be viable. So I'm genuinely quite perplexed. I would be very interested. So, like I said, I wanted to find out what else the lawyers had to say, because it seems like that can't possibly be the entirety of their defence. But I mean, I just want to know. It feels like they must have some other ace up their sleeve, or something they think is an ace, and I'd love to know what it is, because this is obviously an area where the frontiers are being rewritten day by day.
Lee?
Yeah. Excuse me, I'll try that again.
There's a lot of it about.
There isn't a hay fever. It's terrible today. Right, let's try again. I saw that quote as well, the averts threat to Stability's whole business, and I agree with you completely, because I've said before on this podcast, and we said it right from the start, this whole AI business basically starts with theft at a very basic level, and certainly not paying originators for their work. And we, once again, as we did with things like NFTs, have given big tech a pass to get on with this in ways that no one else would have done, and we haven't called the BS on what is generally a business model which involves making as much money as possible before the legals catch up with you. I think AI is slightly different in the fact that the technology is clearly not as overtly Emperor's New Clothes as NFTs were. But even so, even if you put in people like the PRS to sort of collect these things going forward, that does nothing to the billions of people or billions of products that have been scraped, and it doesn't give them any cash. And the people that have basically been fleeced for their stuff and will never see a cent. So, if you walked into Dragon's Den and said, right, I've got a product which is going to make us billions, but to do it, we've got to pillage every repository of human achievement, get away with that, and then we can pretend that's all okay, and then we sell it back to the idiots we stole it from, Deborah Meaden will probably raise an eyebrow.
I love your high bar for judging a business's viabilities, whether it gets through Dragon's Den. One last question on this from Jeff Campbell on Discord says, is it copyright violation if the output isn't a direct copy? What's the dividing line between training a human painter on prior work and training an AI similarly? Roche, do you want to try answering that one?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and it's a bit tricky and would need, but let me say this, it doesn't matter, like, let's take the Jaguar, right? It doesn't matter if the guy who tried, or the car that was stolen, so it doesn't matter if the person who tried to steal that car, or who did steal that car in fact, was going to cannibalize it for parts, or drive it into a lake, or set it on fire. It's like, did they take that car? Yes. Did they have permission? No. It's pretty much theft. So the fact that they're saying, oh yeah, but when we stole your stuff, we change it. It's like, no, hold on. I don't care what you're doing with it. This is licensed images. You've taken 1 billion of them. You didn't have our permission, and now you were using them in some way. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they hid them. They shouldn't have taken them. That's the entire backbone of Getty's, that's the entire backbone of their business. And it's really extraordinary that Stability's is like, oh, this is our business. You're right. And yet that's Getty's business. So that's a different question for another day, and it's a really excellent question from Jeff. But I would say, doesn't matter.
Stop praising Jeff and let him go to his head. Darian, what you wanted to say something before we moved on?
Oh no, I was in danger of opening a hell of a can of worms. Actually, I was just going to say there's a big difference between taking a car so that you permanently deprive the owner of it, and accessing an image online and then processing the downloaded copy of it.
Okay,
so yeah.
Let's slam the door shut on that one.
Sorry,
we'll be here for another hour and we've got lots more to do. Roach, I apologise, but we're going to skip.
Okay.
No. Right, Xbox, Darian.
It's not me, it's Lee.
Oh, Lee, sorry.
It's okay. Any one of us could do it. It doesn't really matter. Right. Some of you may have spotted in the headlines that Microsoft are releasing a handheld Xbox, which is sort of true, but sort of isn't. So this is what's actually happening. Microsoft have worked with Asus to tweak the existing ROG Ally and Ally X handhelds, which we talked about a year and a bit ago. Basically, they've tweaked them into a new design, which is specifically designed to emulate the Xbox experience in a handheld format. So that bit is new. I mean, they've been talking about handheld Xbox for years, I guess, but this is the nearest we're going to get. Now, very simply, the design ethos for these devices is based upon the Xbox controller. So wherever you're listening to me at the moment, if you imagine holding an Xbox controller, the feel of it in your hands, your thumb buttons are all nice. Now, just move your hands apart. Imagine there's a 7-inch screen in the middle of it. Basically, that's what they're going for with this. So this is how it will differ from the stock ROG Ally devices. It's a slightly different shape. There are a couple of differences under the hood as well. These things, by the way, are called the ROG Xbox Ally, so there's really not too much of a stretch in the branding department. There's two versions. The entry-level Xbox Ally, which has the AMD Ryzen Z2A, which is a new chip, up from the Z1, obviously. 16 gig around 512 gig storage. The Ally... I've stopped saying Ally, it's Ally, as in a friend. Ally X is the premium version, and this has the Ryzen AI Z2 Extreme. 24 gig RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. And just a note as a system builder to Asus, if they're listening, 24 gig is a tough number of RAM. If you can't do 32, just try harder. Interestingly, no one buys a system with 24 gig of RAM and thinks, woo, you think, oh yeah, that was a 16, you just shoved an extra 8 in it, come on, why didn't you shove another 16 in it? Cheapskates. Anyway, the screens on both of these, interestingly, are the same as the original ones. They're 7-inch FHDs, 1080p IPS, 500 nits, 120 Hz, VRR, FreeSync, and all that sort of lovely stuff. They have Wi-Fi 6E. There's a plethora of ports around this little thing. 2 USB-Cs with display ports. There's a micro SD slot, headphone jack. But the Ally X swaps one of the USB-Cs into USB 4, which will please someone somewhere, no doubt. Now, these, as I say, these are handhelds, and this is where I start to get a little bit interesting or strange, because the Ally weighs 670 grams, where the Ally X weighs 715 grams. So these aren't light, and they're heavier than the last ROG Ally and the Ally X, and they're also 34% heavier than the Switch 2, and 10% heavier than the Steam Deck OLED. So it's like having a can of soup in each hand, which is the nearest I could get to it in my calculations this morning. They run basically a tweaked version of Windows 11 to optimize it for gaming. They've created a novel little game bar feature where they can claim you can play any game from whatever storefronts, not just the Xbox store, but I guess Battle and all that, Epic and things like that. And you can launch them all from the same menu, so you don't have to go to different stores to launch different games. So I guess that could be quite nice. The other difference between the two machines is the battery. The Ally has a 60 watt hour pack, which is up from the original Ally's 40 watt hour, whereas the Ally X retains the same 80 watt hour battery. So it'll be interesting to see how these benchmarks go, because the screens on these, as I said, are also unchanged. So that got me thinking, either these new devices will have a much longer runtime on a full charge, which would be really nice, or Asus have hit a brick, or Asus/AMD have hit a brick wall with this processor. I've had both ROG Allies in bits in my shop, and they have filled every available space with battery in there. It's also remarkable how different the PCBs are on their layouts, but whatever gets through the night. in the Microsoft promotional, it's one of those heavily scripted phrases which sound plausible and rings alarms bell. Is it will give me a great balance between battery life and performance, which got me thinking, which one is it? Is it, wow, I can't believe how much beer I can drink before falling over? Or is it, considering how much beer he's consumed, it's no wonder he fell over in under an hour? I guess time will tell on the battery one for this once we have some benchmarks. How do you play the games? Well, everything comes from the cloud, obviously, so expect those SSDs to fill up quickly. But what I do know from the originals is you can change the SSDs in them very easily. The ROG Ally is actually really quite fixable, so you can probably, whichever version you buy, you can probably stuff it with a 4TB SSD very easily.
Okay, but just to be clearly, they're not cloud handhelds in the sense that everything's streamed. You're still installing stuff and playing stuff locally, right?
No, you can do. It does Game Pass and Xbox Cloud Gaming.
Yeah. But it does.
Sorry,
do you install locally as well, or is it all?
Yes, yeah, you can install locally too.
Okay.
So, from what I can work out, they've thrown every option that you would get on a PC for Xbox into this device.
Yeah.
So you can stream. You can do what's the remote Xbox remote play.
Yeah.
You can do all that, and you can sort of download onto the device if you're sort of for offline play. So you've got everything available to you.
It was really interesting, actually. A couple of weeks ago, there was some comparisons because Lenovo have put out their new generation of handhelds. One of which is SteamOS, one of which is Windows 11, Windows based, and the difference in performance between SteamOS, which is obviously just very much focused on gaming, and Windows, which is the huge hairy mothball that we've all known and loved for years. And you're talking about 10 frames per second on top games. Battery life was markedly different. I'm sort of surprised that so many of the manufacturers are sticking with Windows rather than just moving to SteamOS. It's marketing money maybe changing hands, I can only assume. But
this week I've been for a customer, I've installed a Linux OS called Bazite, Bazzite, which seems to now I've just said it out loud, I've realised how I've fallen into that trap. But it's tied to Steam, so you can basically load a Linux installation and it will drop straight into Steam into a gaming rig. And the person who is running this just said the performance on his, and it's a Razer gaming laptop, an RTX something in there, so it's no slouch. He said the gaming performance is just so much better.
Yeah.
So yeah, Barry's absolutely right. I guess with it being a Microsoft Xbox console, I guess not having Windows possibly wasn't an option.
Well, yes, absolutely. Gavin Hall saying lots of games aren't available on SteamOS. That's true, but not as many as you'd think. I've got a Steam Deck here, and your list of games that you can't run isn't huge. Certainly not the type of games that you'd want to run on a handheld anyway. But we have got to move on because time is rapidly slipping away, and in our first name is Roche wanted to give us an update on the legal case she's been tracking for a while.
Right, so this is on Rippling and Deal. Now, if you think that stealing people's stuff is okay, look away now. But if you think that it's problematic, then this is a real doozy, and it's only going to get worse for Deal. So, Rippling, in I would say pretty unprecedented public statement, have said that Deal didn't just steal from Rippling, but also stole from 4 other companies. And what they've done is that they have amended their pleadings, and the language, this is Nibs. So, and then the language is really fruity in it. So just for example, I'll just give you high level. They refer to Deal's leadership as the Boaz's racketeering enterprise. And they specifically call out some senior Deal executives, collaborators, and carefully groomed disaffected employees. So this is going to set the summer on fire, I think.
Yeah, just to clarify for a couple of people asking on Discord, we're talking about a company called Deal, Deal, not Dell, the computer company, before we get contacted by their lawyers.
Del.
Sorry,
Deal. Yeah. And just for clarity, that's run by the Boazes. So Axel Boazes and his father Philippe Boazes. That's Bouazez.
Yeah, we've already got the corporate libel in, and let's not get the personal libel done as well. Right, let's move along to. Would you lot stop talking on blooming Discord? I can't see what's been on the schedule. FAA, Lee.
Yes, the Federal Aviation Authority in America has outlined an ambitious goal to bring the US air traffic control system up to date, migrating it away from Windows 95. Now, this is absolutely true because much of the FAA system relies on 95, floppy disks and paper strips, and some wag made a tongue-in-cheek comment that this old system allowed the FAA to avoid CrowdStrike last year, and there is a bit of truth in that. How has it got like this? Well, upgrading the US's air traffic control isn't a case of ordering a few laptops from Amazon. You know, some parts of this network cannot be terminated, so switching over will be incredibly complicated. And the FAA pours a lot of money into this ancient ATC, but the setup ironically provides resistance to a lot of hacking and vulnerabilities. The government's Transport Department, under the Great Orange Overlord, has said that they want this fixed in 4 years, and industry insiders have yet to stop laughing at this unrealistic timeline. The FAA has put out a tender invitation and announced several industry days for companies that are up for the job to come and pitch their ideas.
Okie doke. And finally, LinkedIn, Darian.
Yeah, well, LinkedIn's boss, the CEO of LinkedIn within Microsoft, is a chap called Ryan Roslansky, and it's just been announced that he's moving to also become a head of office. I think this is potentially a good thing because I think LinkedIn has, for better or worse, you might not like it, but I think it's been quite a success story. Obviously, it was an acquisition for Microsoft, and I think it makes perfect sense to integrate the officey side of things more with the networky side of things. Satya Nadella said some stuff about making the professional graph match up with the Microsoft graph or something. Who the hell knows what he was talking about? But basically, I'm optimistic that a fresh face at Office could hopefully bring us some new ideas, which frankly I feel like the whole suite has probably wanted for a couple of decades.
I've just realised I also cut across your brief mention of Switch 2 we were going to throw in there. So give us the 10-second skinny on the Switch 2.
Oh, well, it's actually, I'm afraid it became a bit more complicated than that because obviously the Switch 2 came out in the same week as the Asus Xbox Ally thing. And I've really been back and forth about this because the Asus Xbox thing, is it really an Xbox? Is it not? It's kind of like it meets the Xbox standard. It's like an MSX thing. But I mean, Lee mentions it's got 24 gigabytes of RAM and he doesn't like that. But the Xbox Series S has 10 gigabytes of RAM. The Xbox Series X has 16, I think, or 14, some kind of weird amount. Lee's just shaking his head. He doesn't like any of this. But and it's kind of got me thinking: is Xbox actually a platform? Because the thing about the Nintendo Switch 2, sorry, I'll try to be brief. You know what it is? It's a given. It's a single standard quantity. It's made by one manufacturer. It has one specification, and that is kind of why people like consoles. Partly because the developers know exactly what they're targeting, and it feels like the Xbox. I mean, already with the distinction between the S and the X, but now with the arrival of the Ally, which has a different spec again, is becoming much more of a moving target. It's becoming an open platform, much like. And then I sort of thought, well, hang on, exactly like the IBM PC, and that became the world standard because of that. So perhaps actually Microsoft, having come from this background itself, knows what it's doing after all.
While we're clearing up things on the games front, Gavin Hall makes a good point that the Ally handhelds that we talked about, they play PC games, even though it's labelled Xbox. They do not play Xbox console games unless you're streaming them via Xbox streaming. So
that's another way that they've really muddied the water, though.
They really have. Okay, let's finally move on to hot hardware. And this week it's with me, and it's not hardware at all. In fact, it's software. And this is the DIA browser, DIA. This is from the same company called the Browser Company, who made the Arc browser, which was the sort of trendy browser of the past couple of the years. So Arc really changed the entire look of the web browser, banged the tabs to the side, brought lots of different features into the way that you browse the web, had things like where you could change the way a website looks if you wanted to, and various other cool features. It did have some basic AI features built in towards the end as well, where it would summarize pages and stuff like that. But it sort of ran out of steam, and the browser company put out something about a month ago saying, look, we've tried hard with this, but it's not catching fire. We can keep throwing effort at it, but it's not working for us. So we're going to put all our efforts into a new browser, and this is what Dia is. And Dia, you'll be shocked to hear, is very much focused on AI. It's very much AI before anything else. And so what you have is a very stripped back web browser. It's a Chromium-based browser, so you can import data from other web browsers and Chromium extensions work on it. But all you get is a very plain sort of tab window and nothing else in terms of user interface. But when you open a new tab, you don't open an address bar. You open what looks like a search box in the middle of the page, and you start interacting with the AI. So it has a number of interesting features. So obviously you can use that in the same way you might use ChatGPT, get it to answer questions, get it to write something for you, blah, 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 blah. So good, so normal. Where it really starts to stretch its legs a bit is when it starts interacting with your open tabs. So for example, I can have, I was doing a piece, I'm doing my column on Apple this month. There's a little teaser for you that puts sales up by several thousands. So I was doing some research on Apple this morning. I had a page of the Apple leadership open on in my browser, and I asked it, how long have these executives been at Apple? And it goes through the page, starts clicking on the links, and works out how long each of those people have been at Apple. If you can do that kind of thing with multiple tabs. So let's say, for example, I'm buying a car and I've got 4 or 5 tabs open with different cars I'm thinking about buying. You can open the AI chat on the side and say, you use the @ sign to say, as an indicator that you want to start talking about a tab, and you pick the tabs that you want selected. It brings up a list of your open tabs, and you say, select these 5 tabs, compare the cars in these 5 tabs, and it produces like a table, show you the features of all of them, the price, 0 to 60 petrol consumption, that kind of stuff. So it's able to look across different tabs in your browser, not just the tab you've got open. The other good thing about this is that it can interact directly with the website in front of you. So if I, for example, get ChatGPT to write an email for me, I have to say, copy the email I've got, the email I received into ChatGPT, say, write a reply to Dave saying, I'll meet him next Tuesday, blah, 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 blah. And then I have to copy the response back into Gmail. It's a bit of a faff. With this, you can just say, it can see the email from Dave is open on my screen. You can just in the AI window down the bottom, you say, write a reply to Dave saying, we'll see him next Tuesday, thanks very much. And it writes it out, and then you can just press an insert button and it inserts it straight into the Gmail window. So it's cutting out a lot of that to and fro-in that you currently have with current AI chatbots like ChatGPT or Gemini. The final thing here is that it has a feature called memory, which is opt-in at the moment. It's not turned on by default, but the browser can sit there looking at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and remember everything in the same way that Windows Recall works. And it can use that to sort of harvest data about you. So not only can it pick up your sort of writing style, so if I write several emails into a Gmail window, it claims it will be able to pick up my writing style. I hasten to add, this was only released yesterday, so there's a limit to how much I've been able to test that so far. But it also picks up personal details. So it picks up my name, my date of birth, whatever. So if you go to a web form and, I was booking a flight yesterday, you go to the flight thing and you can say, just fill out this for me. And it scrapes that detail, remembers it, even using drop-down menus. It can, for date of birth, it can interact with those and fill out that kind of detail. So there's some interesting stuff there. It's going to be really interesting to see how that works over a longer period. There are obvious security questions to ask that they're not really forthcoming about how this works, how that data is protected. I do wonder if I'm becoming a bit of a guinea pig for something I'm going to regret in a few months' time. But the things we do for testing. But it's certainly a very different approach to browsers, and certainly much more. We've seen, Microsoft build Copilot into the Edge browser. Google's doing it with Gemini, but this is the first browser I've seen so far where AI is front and center and is the primary focus, and almost the web browsing becomes secondary. Any thoughts or questions?
It's really hard to say without spending, some time using it for yourself, isn't it? I think it's quite brave of you to try to sell this to us, to be honest.
It sounds. Listen to what you say. I understand it. It's innovative even. But it does also. The picture I've got in my head is opening a cab door and being knocked out by the smell of whiskey, and it's like, I don't want to get into this taxi.
Yes. Roche?
I like it. I really like this idea that you can go, you need a product, you just go and you check, and then you have all of your tabs open, then you go, okay, compare this, and presumably then you can say, this is my budget, this is how big my business is, this is what I need. Oh my God, I love ChatGPT, but this, for small businesses who are looking to kind of parse through that amount of noise and then come up with a solution for a product. For flights, you mentioned you were doing flights. So that all of those, compare the market, money supermarket, all of those airline things, gone.
Yeah.
There is an interesting quote from the boss where he says, you can learn an awful lot about someone just from watching them browse the web. And someone has spent 20 odd years diving through people's internet histories to get them out of certain messes. That really absolutely is true. And I wonder how far this goes when, your wife is shopping for something new and going, well, yeah, I'm going to show you all these clothes which are in latex because that seems to be what your husband looks at. I can just see so many problems with how it's going to collate all the information. I mean, for example, what's it doing with the credit card number that I'm typing in, stuff like that? I know you said there's the security holes. This whole thing just makes me really nervous, and it shouldn't be. I should embrace it, like Roche says, be a real sort of passionate about it. But there's so many red flags and bells in my head at the moment.
But sorry, Barry, for speaking over you. So I don't put your credit card details into this, but if you just use it for research, that's all you do. You've got to compare products. You've got to compare documents, literature. I can see so many practical applications for it. I'm really happy now. If it's I don't want to have to keep buying because I've got Copilot, and then I didn't really like that, and I've got ChatGPT, and I do love that, but now I really like the sound of this, and I'm like, this is going to be my AI bill at the end of the year is going to be insane. I may as well just actually hire somebody.
Yeah, well, that is a big question here. So Dia at the moment is just in a free beta, but what happened with Arc was once they added the AI features, they released something called Arc Max, which included the AI, but that was on a subscription. I think it's about $10 a month from memory, but don't quote me on that. So I think all this AI is going to come at a cost. I think inevitably this is going to cost money once it leaves the beta test phase. But
well, the other reality is if it doesn't cost, then they're going to be making the money out of you from some other way, and that is selling your data. So yeah. That
I'm always certain it's going to be the charging you directly rather than flogging your data. But again, I need to look more closely at the business model. Okay, so if there are no further questions, it's 2:00. So I'm going to set the poll rolling on Discord. So if you're listening live on Discord at pcpro.link/Discord, you can enter your vote now. And I'm going to start with Darian.
Yeah, sorry, I've been quiet because I've just been installing it myself, and I've got to say, you didn't mention the ridiculous screen taking over animation, the really showy. That immediately makes me apprehensive. I want an AI kind of companion which is going to be minimally intrusive, not one that's going to go, "Hey, I'm here and I'm whizzy and I'm noisy and I'm everything that's going to grab your attention and distract you." So that's not a good start, but nevertheless, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt because I've got to admit, Roche has actually won me over with her argument. I was going to say the last thing I need is more AI, and absolutely the last thing I need is more browsers. But yes, if you just think of it as a particular tool for one mode of interacting with the web, because it is currently free, as you say, then yeah, I can see a benefit to that, and I can immediately start to think of ways in which it could be valuable to me. So although this is the earliest of early impressions, I say yes, hot.
It's literally just installed it and it's hot already. Brilliant. That's the depth for PC Pro testing for you.
Well, normally we don't actually install the things. We just go by what you said. So
that's a fair point. Lee.
It's funny. I sort of slightly agreeing with Darian. Roche sort of won me round with, frankly, a sensible comment about that. You just use this as a research tool. So on that, it is slightly warmed up for me. But unfortunately, until I've seen it and had my hands on it and worked out whether it's frankly a born liar or everything it tells me is wrong, I really can't. There are just too many warnings at this moment. So I'm afraid it's a borderline not for me.
Okay. Roche?
Oh, yeah, I'm in.
That's hot. I'm getting a slight kick in on Discord for failing to mention this is Mac only right now. With Arc, they started on Mac and eventually transported to Windows. I'm sure they'll get there with this, but yes, for the time being, it is Mac only. But it is not swung the hyperlay on Discord, where it's taken a 74% to 26% beasting. Sorry, I didn't say myself, but I think it's hot. I think it's good to see people innovating like this, and I'm very much in that camp that Rose said of using specific browsers for specific purposes. So I could see myself using it, if not as my day-to-day browser. But a lot of the general public amongst the great PC Pro readership can't, so it's taken a bit of a hiding out there. So it's very much a split vote on DL the browser. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We'll be back next Thursday at 1 p.m. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Right.
There's nothing more to add. Let's not get into the jurisprudence argument right now.
I see that's already kicked off on.
No, I think we drew a line under it.
Yeah,
Darian is wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely where we ended it.
Folks, I've got to go enough. I've got to go and pick a kid up from school.
I don't think we're going to miss anything important. So.
Au revoir, folks. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Bye.
See you later.
Yeah, I'll wrap up too.
Do we have to stay on, or we can click out now and?
I'll click out now. It takes like 5 seconds to finish uploading. So.
Okay, brilliant.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye.
See ya. Cheers.